Yes. Although it may seem to many of you that my standing here on a stage looks familiar, I can assure you that it does not feel that way. I fell in love with acting, not because Patrick Stewart wanted to show off, but because I could pretend to be someone other than Patrick Stewart. The stage was where I could avoid being P. Stew and indulge in a fantasy that I was really smarter, better looking, funnier, more charismatic than in fact I was. Today, however, that option is not available to me. It is not Jean-Luc Picard, it is not Charles Xavier who is standing here in front of you. Although I can assure you that if they had the opportunity to vote in the 2016 referendum, they would have voted Remain. And why? Because unity, a common cause, the well-being and fairness of society and debate were paramount to the beliefs of both these fictional characters. Needless to say, for these reasons, I have little doubt that they would today be backing the people's vote. Since the 2016 referendum, there has been a concerted effort by many, including government, to shut down debate about Brexit and to tell us we should simply trust ministers to get on with it because Brexit is an irreversible process. That we shouldn't worry about the cost and complexity of following through with it or the litany of broken promises. Well, today we say that's not good enough. Our country's future is at stake, and we will not stand idly by. If we leave the EU, Brexit will shape this country's future for decades to come. That is why I support a people's vote on the final deal. Monday, the 1st of January 1973 was one of the best days of my life. I was working with the Royal Shakespeare Company. My wife and I owned a tiny little cottage in Warwickshire. We had a young son and a daughter on the way, and I had a second-hand Ford Prefect. But the reason for joy on that New Year's Day was that the UK had finally become a member of the European Union. I grew up in a working-class home in an industrial West Riding of Yorkshire. My father was a commissionaire at a local chemical factory, and my mother worked in a heavy woolen weaving shed, surrounded by noise, polluted air, and high risk. But she loved the social atmosphere of friendship, laughter, companionship, and trust. She was a member of a community, and that meant everything to her. My father had been a regular soldier, but his post-war working life was never as good as it had been during his years of service. He loved that job for the same reason my mother loved hers: community. I was born in July 1940, but of course the war did not affect me directly. I slept in a cot beside my mother's bed and later shared her bed. It seemed I didn't have a father, but I was well cared for. But the years after the war were very different. Shortages of everything, rationing, and the black market. But it was then, little by little, that I began to learn what the war had meant to the adults around me. The loss of loved ones, of severely injured family and friends returning home to a challenging life. Servicemen like my father, suffering from severe shell shock, or post-traumatic stress disorder, as we now know it. The cost of war was everywhere, and many never recovered from it. That was the Europe I grew up in, and that is why, when Britain joined the EEC in January 1973, that date was so special to me. The main aim, as stated in the EEC's preamble, was to preserve peace and liberty and to lay the foundations of an even closer union between the peoples of Europe. It's